Hi, I'm Sifu Kuttel, and in this video we're going to be working with the Taiji Jian, and we're going to be doing some upward slicing. So let's grab our sword and get to work. Now in this video we're going to be focusing on an upward slicing technique. This is going to be upward diagonal that crosses the center line of our body. So we're not trying to maintain the same side as we do this. We're going upward and diagonal across the body. Now we're going to be doing this stepping forward, which can become a very beautiful looking motion. When you go back to back, it becomes very nice and circular, and it looks very beautiful to watch. But the one thing I want to encourage is that you don't jump to that beautiful flowing part. Instead, focus on the robotic part, focus on your weight distribution, focus on correct stepping, and correct cutting technique. As we do this, you want to make sure that you're slicing upward with the blade and that you're not just trying to flick the blade upward and point at the end or scoop with a flat blade, which many people tend to do. So really pay attention to cutting a nice line with the blade itself, and then later on you can focus on bringing the hand up and circling in a more beautiful flowing fashion. Now when it comes to upward slicing, we're going to be using the exact same edge of the blade to cut every single time. So when we have a double-edged blade like the Jian, it's easy to try to cut with the wrong side of the blade. So a good way to know which side you're cutting with is to pay attention to the knuckles of the fingers. This is the same side that we want to use when we're doing our upward cut. The other thing you want to think of doing is leading with the pommel of the sword, so the very bottom of the handle. You want to think of leading up with that first. Now the last little detail and the last little trick to remember which side to do this to is, it's very simple. If we're going to cut across our own body, if I'm looking forward and I'm bringing my sword upward towards my left, I will have my left foot forward. And if I'm cutting upward towards my right, I will have my right foot forward, okay? So pay attention to how it works for you. If I try to say it right here and you're trying to match me, I'm bringing it up to my right, you might be bringing it up to your left. So don't worry about that. Don't let that get confusing for you. Just think sword cutting to your upper right, right foot forward, sword cutting to your upper left, left foot forward. The rest is very simple from there. So to make this easy for training, you can always start with your sword finger touching your wrist the entire time. That way you don't have to think about anything other than the sword itself. Later on, we'll alternate from the hand being out to touching the wrist, to hand being out to touching the wrist. And that's going to be the most typical way that you see this in Taiji. Now let's start with the sword in a stationary position, and we'll just start with the first basic cut. Touch the wrist with the sword finger, point the blade down. If this right now is pointing down towards my right side, I'm going to raise up and slice to my left. So now it goes from the bottom right, upward diagonal to the left corner. So up this way. Now I don't want to end with the tip of the sword pointing upward. I want to end with the tip of the sword pointing forward. Even slightly down is good here. We'll continue making a circle after this, but it's first important to know you don't want to overdo your upward slice. This is a great way to end up letting go of your sword. So you need to make sure you don't overextend yourself and the cut finishes here. Now let's bring the sword down, point down towards the opposite side, still touch the wrist. Make sure the edge of the knuckles are pointing outward, and then we'll cut up towards the other side. Again, down to up, down to up. Same rule applies here. We don't want to try to turn the wrist and point the blade up. We're going to keep the blade pointing forward as we slice upward. Okay, slice upward here. Now we'll practice each side, so I can slice up, point the sword down to the other side, knuckles are pointing forward, slice up. Point the sword down, knuckles are pointing forward, lead with the pommel coming up, point the sword down, lead with the pommel coming up, sword down, lead with the pommel, sword down, lead with the pommel. Notice I start pointing the sword down behind me, continuing that little circle. Up, point down, up, point down, up, point down, up, point down, up, point down. And then now we get a nice circular motion with this slice. Again, up, point down, up, point down, up, point down, up. Let it circle back, let it circle back, let it circle back. Okay, now let's add the stance in. Remember that rule of thumb, if my left foot is forward, I'm going to be cutting up to the left. Let's just work on single steps here. We don't have to start making it, super flowery and fast. So, point the sword back, down behind you. I have my sword pointing down towards my right. I'm going to step with my left foot forward, and then I'm going to cut upward to the left. Again, pointing down, touch that wrist, step, and cut. If I'm pointing towards you, here, coming upward this way, up and across. Now this in itself is an upward slice, and we shouldn't discount it because we try to put this together into a more circular motion. This is the technique that we're trying to highlight and identify here. So do not overlook this simple part of it. Right here, cut. Now bring the sword back. I'm going to step with my right foot forward, and I cut up to the right. Okay, so again, drop the sword back. I'll have it to my right side here. I step forward with my left foot, cut up to my left. Drop back, step forward with the right foot, cut up to the right. Drop back, step forward with the left foot, cut up to the left. All right, now we're doing this in Tai Chi, so we cannot take simple steps forward and try to move fast. We have to have complete movements with correct stepping, weight shifting, and balance together. So if I'm starting with the sword back to my right, I step, bring the toes down, shift forward, and end as the sword comes up across the body. Now, as I shift back, I point the blade down, pivot my foot, step forward, and then now bring it up to the other side. Bring it back, shift. Notice as the sword comes back, I shift the weight, step, bring the sword up. Shift the weight back, sword comes back, step, and I bring the blade up. If I'm facing this way, sword pointing down to my right, I step, toes come down, shift forward and cut. Shift back as I bring the sword back, step, upward, cut. Shift back, start bringing the sword back, step. Notice once I'm stepping, the sword is back here. So I'm not trying to already start my cut while I'm stepping down. The step has to complete, and then I can shift forward and cut. So the timing is going to be a little bit more of the sword dropping back as we step forward, and then we can shift forward and cut. Make this mechanical. So we have really important stopping points here. Stop, shift, step, stop. Shift, step, stop. Shift, step, stop. When you get comfortable with that, then you can start trying to tie it together. And then we have this beautiful flow. But you can't have a beautiful flow unless you have nice, clean technique and consistent stepping. So I start with my sword back, step, up, shift, step, up, shift, step, up, shift, step, up, shift, step, up. I have to continue the motion of the blade, and I have to match my feet to it. So really take that time, because it's not easy to do that, and otherwise you end up with these forward weighted steps that we try to avoid when we're doing Tai Chi. So don't rush to get to this part where we're advancing forward and keeping the blade in a continuous circle, because you're going to end up inevitably skipping some important part of our footwork or part of the technique with the sword. So really take the time and then smoothen out the edges incrementally over time to make it to that last part where it's just a continuous forward motion. All right, so there you have it. Now the next thing you can add to this is you can change how your guard hand moves with this. So as I slice towards my sword hand side, I will still touch the wrist with my sword finger. But then as I come up to the opposite side, I'll lead with my sword finger as if I'm doing an upward block, and then I can follow up with the blade in an upward slice. It's not necessarily that you're going to block and slice somebody, you're not going to block their weapon. If you're close enough, you can control their hand and try to lift the hand up and then try to cut underneath. But this is typically just done as a nice, beautiful expression of the body and movement. So make sure, really lead with the sword with this one. You can change your hand positions to match it later. Now, I said this a lot. I said it in the introduction. I said it during the workout part, and I'll say it again here. Take your time on this one. Focus on the more robotic parts. It's okay to be a little bit stiff at first. Step, let the toes come down, lift with the sword, drop the sword back, pivot, step, let the toes come down, lift. It doesn't have to be this beautiful circular flowing thing right away, because to do that correctly, it has to come through consistent and precise movement. So the more time you spend on the robotic stop, stopping, stop point, rigid edges kind of a thing, you're going to have a much better fluid motion once you start smoothing out those edges. So take a little more time in the beginning. Don't worry if you're stopping. Don't worry if it doesn't look beautiful at first. Make sure the technique is correct. Then you can start tying things together later on, and it will be much more complete, not only in appearance, but in your martial arts training as well. All right, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And as always, be sure to subscribe. Let me know what you think. And if you have any requests for anything else, it's a huge help for the channel if you share these videos too. And just let me know how things go with your sword training. Till next time, this is Sifu Kuttel.